The Oklahoma City Thunder shocked the NBA world 5 years ago when they received a record 5 first-round draft picks, 2 pick swaps, and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander from the Los Angeles Clippers in a trade for Paul George. Thanks in part to that load of draft picks, SGA developed into an MVP contender, and the Thunder are a favorite to win the Western Conference this season. The return value from that trade between the Clippers and Thunder set the standard in how fringe playoff teams would rebuild by acquiring multiple future draft picks and adding more young prospects to the roster. In the years following that franchise-altering trade in 2019, other teams have followed the Thunder's blueprint to acquire picks and prospects. The Houston Rockets, Utah Jazz, San Antonio Spurs, and Brooklyn Nets have acquired 22 first-round picks in 7 years of pick swaps in 6 different trades. Each team received a minimum of 3 first-rounders. In 2 separate trades with the Phoenix Suns and the New York Knicks, Brooklyn acquired 9 first-round picks, including 8 unprotected. As a result of all transactional movement, 5 teams control a whopping 62 first-round picks over the next 7 years. Brooklyn, Oklahoma City, Utah, and San Antonio hold 13 out of the 30 first-round selections. The blockbuster trades that have resulted in a perfect storm as it relates to the 2025 NBA Draft that could feature the next franchise stars: Duke's Cooper Flagg, the Rutgers duo of Eris Bailey and Dylan Harper, and French guard Nolan Traore. The 4 players are projected top 5 picks in ESPN's latest 2025 mock draft. To gain a better understanding of which teams are positioned to dominate the league's annual draft for the rest of this decade, let's start with San Antonio, which could have 4 first-round picks in June and the possibility of selecting a franchise player to complement star Victor Wembanyama. San Antonio Spurs key players that were traded included Kawhi Leonard, DeMar DeRozan, Derek White, DeJounte Murray, and Jakob Poeltl. The players who are on the San Antonio Spurs roster from previously acquired picks are Keldon Johnson, Blake Wesley, and Malachi Branham. San Antonio has an incoming of 12 first-round picks, all 7 of their own, 2 unprotected from Atlanta, the 2025 and 2027 pick, top 14 protected from Charlotte, top 10 protected from Chicago, unprotected from Minnesota, swap rights with Atlanta in 2026, swap rights with Boston in 2028, swap rights the more favorable of Minnesota and Dallas in 2030, and the swap rights in Sacramento. The value of the Hawks' unprotected 25 and 27 first-round picks and the right to swap a first in 2026 with Atlanta trumps any first-round pick that Brooklyn has accumulated. The Hawks won 36 games last season and traded DeJounte Murray in the offseason. They have never won more than 43 games with Trae Young on the roster. Besides a first from Atlanta in 2025, the Spurs could add 2 additional lottery picks to join Victor Wembanyama, their own, and a top 10 projected first from Chicago. Despite San Antonio adding veterans Chris Paul, Harrison Barnes this offseason, the Spurs could still find themselves outside the playoffs because of a deep Western Conference. The first from Chicago could be in the back end of the lottery. The Bulls elected not to sign DeMar DeRozan, trading him to the Sacramento Kings, and they traded guard Alex Caruso to the Thunder. San Antonio has an unprotected first from Atlanta in 2027 and one from Minnesota in 2031. The Spurs can also swap first in 4 out of the next 7 years. Starting with Atlanta in 2026, San Antonio has the ability to swap first with Boston in 2028, Dallas or Minnesota in 2029, and finally Sacramento in 2031. The Spurs' 12 first-round picks and 4 years of pick swaps should accelerate a rebuild that started when Kawhi Leonard was traded in 2018 and continues with Wembanyama as the face of the franchise. Oklahoma City Thunder. The key players traded were Paul George, Russell Westbrook, Steven Adams, Al Horford, and Chris Paul. Oklahoma City has an incoming of 13 first-round picks, all 7 of their own, and unprotected from LA Clippers in 2026, a top 4 protected from Houston in 2026, a top 10 protected from Utah in 2025 or top 8 in 2026, top 14 protected from Miami in 2025, a top 6 protected from Philadelphia, a top 5 protected from Denver, top 5 again from Denver, that's 2027 and 2029, and can make pick swaps with the Los Angeles Clippers in 2025 and 2027, with Houston in 2025, and swap rights again with Dallas in 2028. In 2026, Oklahoma City has 2 of the most favorable of its own, Houston, if between 5 and 30, and the Los Angeles Clippers. The least favorable of the 3 first will go to Philadelphia. In 2027, the Thunder can swap the more favorable of their own in Denver, if 6 through 30 with the Los Angeles Clippers. Out of the 5 teams that control the draft's 2025 first round, no team is better positioned to win now and have sustainable success in the future than Oklahoma City. Behind SGA, the Thunder returned the same starting lineup that won 57 games last season. They also added Caruso, Isaiah Hartenstein, without giving up draft compensation. Oklahoma City's payroll is expected to increase because of likely extensions to SGA, Jalen Williams, Chet Holmgren, and Caruso. Where the Thunder have an advantage over other high-spending teams is the surplus of 13 first-round picks and inexpensive contracts available to retool their roster. One of those first-round picks is unprotected in 2026 from the Clippers. The Thunder also have the right to swap first with a Paul George-less Clippers team in 2025 and 2027. One trend to closely monitor is Oklahoma City consolidating and trading first-round capital for the ability to swap first in the future. Last season, the Thunder traded a late 2024 first to Dallas. It eventually was rerouted to Washington Wizards for Daniel Gafford for the right to swap first in 2028. The Thunder also traded the least favorable of their own 2027 first in Denver, if between 6 and 30, to the Clippers for the right to swap first in 2027. The trade helped pave the way for the Clippers to acquire James Harden. Because of the 6 first-round picks acquired from other teams and 2 years of swaps with the Clippers, the Thunder could select in the lottery and also finish each season with one of the best records in the NBA. The Brooklyn Nets. The key players that were traded: James Harden, Kyrie Irving, Kevin Durant, Royce O'Neal, and Mikal Bridges. Players who are still on Brooklyn's roster from previously acquired picks: Noah Clowney. Now, the Brooklyn Nets have an incoming of 15 first-round picks, all 7 of their own, 4 unprotected from New York in 2025, 2027, 2029, and 2031, top 5 protected from Milwaukee in 2025, the least favorable of Phoenix, Houston, if between 11 and 30, and Oklahoma City in 2025, a top 8 protected from Philadelphia in 2027 or 2028, the least favorable of Dallas, Phoenix, and Houston in 2029, and swap rights with Phoenix or New York in 2028, and have 12 tradable first. The Nets are an example of how quickly things change in the NBA. 3 seasons ago, a lineup that included Harden, Irving, and Durant had Brooklyn 1 win away from the conference finals. But after Harden axed out in 2022, then Irving and Durant a year later, Brooklyn went from a contender to a team with no identity, despite acquiring 8 first-round picks in exchange for 3 players. The Nets had no control of their own first-round picks because of the Harden trade in 2021, and there were no benefits for the team to rebuild at that time. But all of that changed this past June when the Rockets traded the Nets back their own 2025 first-round pick and then eliminated the right to swap first in 2026. The trade with the Rockets allowed Brooklyn to send their best player, Mikal Bridges, to the New York Knicks for 4 unprotected first-round picks and the right to swap first in 2028.
There was a lot of teams that were interested in Bojan specifically, and of course, I have a great group alongside with me, and then collaborating with the coaches and the staff of the front office, from the cap guys, from the analytics people, everybody, you name it. And this is one of those things that we know in order to build this thing and turn it around, we're going to have various different avenues to build this with, and one is to stop procuring these first round picks, any picks to be that for that matter. So this is one of those avenues which we're going to do it.
The Bridges trade has Brooklyn possessing a league-high 15 first-round picks over the next 7 years, including 4 in the 2025 draft. 3 of those first, Milwaukee, New York, and Oklahoma City, could fall later in the first round in the 20s. Next is the Utah Jazz. The key traded players were Rudy Gobert, Donovan Mitchell, Royce O'Neal, Mike Conley, and Kelly Olynyk. Players who are still on the roster from acquired picks are Keontae George, Bryce Sensabaugh, and Isaiah Collier. The Utah Jazz have 13 first-round picks, 6 of their next 7 owned, 2 unprotected from Minnesota in 2025 and 2027, 3 unprotected from the Cavaliers in 2025, 2027, and 2029, top 5 protected from Los Angeles in 2027, top 5 protected from Minnesota in 2029, swap rights from Minnesota or Cleveland in 2026, and from Cleveland in 2028. And they have 9 tradable first-round picks. The Jazz continue to sit in a holding pattern. Out of the next 7 first-round picks acquired in the Rudy Gobert and Donovan Mitchell blockbuster trades, only 1 has been conveyed. Utah drafted guard Keontae George with the 2023 first-round pick from Minnesota. Utah does have the same number of first-round picks as the Thunder, including 5 unprotected, but it lacks a franchise player to fast-forward its rebuild. The Jazz could be impacted also by the value of the Cavaliers and Timberwolves first-round picks too. Cleveland extended Mitchell, Jared Allen, and Evan Mobley this offseason. Meanwhile, Minnesota returns the same starting 5 who reached the conference finals last season. Anthony Edwards, Karl Anthony Towns, and Jaden McDaniels are also under contract through at least the 2027-2028 season. Utah has an unprotected first-round pick from each team in 2025. Its most valuable first could be from the Lakers in 2027. Although it is a top 5 protected, there is no guarantee LeBron James will be on the roster in 2026-2027 since the 4-time NBA champion, who turns 40 on December 30th, has indicated that the end of his playing career is drawing near. The Jazz enter year 3 of a rebuild that started in 2022 but have still not been able to secure a high lottery pick despite going 13-41 after the trade deadline the past 2 seasons. Utah signed Lauri Markkanen to a $220 million extension, but the majority of the roster consists of 9 players who are 23 years old or younger. Finally, the Houston Rockets. The key players that were traded were Harden and Eric Gordon. Players who are still on the roster from previously acquired picks are Cam Whitmore, Tari Eason, and Reed Shepherd. They have 9 incoming first-round picks. They own their first in 2025 and 2026 if 1 through 4, 2027, 2028, 29, 30, and 31. An unprotected from Phoenix in 2027, 2 most favorable of own between Dallas and Phoenix in 2029, a swap more favorable of Phoenix in 2025, the less favorable of their own if between 11 and 30, and Oklahoma City, then other to Brooklyn. And then another swap with Brooklyn in 2027. We are still a ways away from judging if Houston's trade with Brooklyn in late June was a smart move or a historic mistake. The Rockets eliminated the right to swap first with Brooklyn in 2025 and sent back a 2026 first from the Nets. They still have the right to swap first with Brooklyn in 2027. In return, the Rockets received 4 draft assets: the right to swap first with Phoenix in 2025, the Suns' 2027 unprotected first, the more favorable 2029 Dallas or Phoenix first, the right to swap their 2029 first with the less favorable of Dallas and Phoenix.
Your first round swaps. And, and I think it made sense. It diversified our kind of portfolio of picks going out. It pushed them out a little bit, which is really good for us. We're a very young team right now. And so pushing those picks out and having some draft picks a little further out, we think makes sense, both in terms of our ability to trade those picks, but also in terms of just picking them so that so that we don't have quite as many guys in their first, second, and third year at the same time.
The Rockets picked up 2 future unprotected firsts, but possibly at the cost of landing projected 2025 number 1 pick Cooper Flagg and projected top draft picks Cameron Boozer and AJ DeBonsta. Brooklyn finished last season with its worst record since 2017-18 and sent Houston the number 3 pick in the draft as a result of the 2021 Harden trade with the Rockets, who drafted Shepherd. The Rockets do not have the quantity of first-round picks that the other 4 teams have, but along with the Thunder, they have a roster that can compete for a playoff spot this season. On the screen now, you see all 30 teams listed, the first-round picks they have, their tradable first, and by seeing this, you are able to see which teams own the next 7 drafts. Also, to make a note, a team is allowed to trade first or second round picks in up to 7 drafts from 2025 to 2031. A draft pick cannot be traded after the 7th draft, and no team may trade a future first round pick if it leaves the team without first round picks in any 2 consecutive years. There are 4 notable teams: the Memphis Grizzlies, the New Orleans Pelicans, Toronto Raptors, and Orlando Magic that have full control of their next 7 first-round picks. That means each team could potentially trade up to 4 unprotected picks plus 3 pick swaps in a deal for a superstar to help put them over the top. The Magic are still owed a first-round pick from the Denver Nuggets that they could potentially move in a trade. The pick is top 5 protected in 2025, 2026, and 2027. The Raptors also have a 2026 top 4 protected first from the Indiana Pacers. The first is top 4 protected in 2027 if not conveyed in the prior season. New Orleans also has 2 Milwaukee Bucks top 4 protected first in 2025 and 2027 that it can use in a trade. However, if the first round pick falls outside the top 4, the draft conditions are extinguished and no pick is sent. The future first round picks for both the Warriors and the Lakers will be highlighted this year, especially if both teams fail to put up wins this season. Golden State owes Washington a top 20 protected first in 2030 from the Chris Paul trade, but can trade up to 3 firsts in 2026, 2028, and 2030 if between 1 and 20. The Warriors can also swap first in every season, including 2030, but only for the top 20 picks. The Lakers sent New Orleans their 2025 first, which was then sent to Atlanta in the Murray trade, and Utah a 2027 top 5 protected first as part of the D'Angelo Russell trade. Los Angeles has 3 firsts available, 2029, 2030, and 2031, but can only trade a maximum of 2, which are the 2029 and 2031. The Lakers can trade both picks and put protections on them, but because of the 7-year rule, the protection can only be for the year of the pick and cannot carry over. For example, the Lakers can trade the top 4 protected 2031 to Atlanta with the condition that a 2031 second is sent if the first is not conveyed, which would increase the risk for the Hawks because there'd be no insurance that they actually get a first round pick out of the deal.
Incremental growth. So as we analyze opportunities, we have to do it through that lens. And I said this at the beginning of the season, if there's an opportunity to get all the way to the end and win a championship, there's no resource we'll hold on to if we feel like that's there. But
Boston, New York, and Philadelphia still have first round picks available despite being in the apron this season. The Celtics sent San Antonio the right to swap first, top 1 protected, for Derek White, and then a 2029 first to Portland as part of the Drew Holiday trade, and are still allowed to move their 2025, 2027, and 2031 first in any trade. They can also swap first over the next 7 years except for 2028 and 2030. Boston is allowed to trade its 2031 first despite being over the second apron this season. If the Celtics finish over the apron after the season ends, their 2032 first is not allowed to be included in the trade. New York traded 4 first round picks in the Bridges trade, but is allowed to trade 2 future firsts. The Knicks have a 2025 top 13 protected first from Detroit and top 10 protected first from Washington. Both firsts are protected in 2026 if they do not convey in 2025. New York can also swap its own first in 2026, 2030, and 2031. Philadelphia owes first to Oklahoma City and Brooklyn, but has the draft assets to pull off a blockbuster trade. The 76ers received 2 first-round picks from the Clippers. They also have the right to swap firsts with LA in 2028 as part of the Harden trade and can send up to 4 firsts. The Spurs control the Hawks' first-round pick in the next 3 seasons from the Murray trade. Atlanta, however, recouped 2 valuable firsts when Murray was sent to New Orleans. The Hawks have the Lakers' unprotected first in 2025 and more favorable 2027 top 4 protected New Orleans or Milwaukee first. In 3 separate trades, the Dallas Mavericks sent a 2024, 2027, and 2029 first to acquire Daniel Gafford, Kyrie Irving, and PJ Washington. Because the Ted Stepien rule, the restriction of teams trading first-round picks in back-to-back consecutive seasons only applies to future seasons, Dallas is allowed to trade its 2025 first. The Mavericks can also trade a 2031 first, but are not allowed to include protections that roll over to the next year. Because of prior trades, Cleveland, the Los Angeles Clippers, Miami, Milwaukee, and Phoenix are allowed to trade only 1 future first-round pick. Denver and Minnesota have no first-round picks available to trade. The Suns, Bucks, and Timberwolves are projected to finish over the second apron this season. Their 2032 first-round picks will become frozen and unable to trade starting in July. If you like this type of content, give it a like and a subscribe for more content just like this. Thank you for listening to The Insights.